Freya Josephine Hollick, welcome to Australian Musician.
Thank you for having me.
Growing up in regional Victoria, what were you listening to?
Lots of different stuff. I was very lucky. My parents really like great music. So we grew up on things like Neil Young and Beastie Boys, Yo La Tengo, Wilco, Ry Cooder, all different kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
Towns Van Zandt.
So, who were
Yeah.
the main alt country influences for you?
For me, probably Wilco was the first one that I really got into as a young, as a teenager. I went to see them live with my dad quite a few times. We used to go and see Calexico, all that sort of modern alt country stuff. But we did grow up listening to things like Graham Parsons and Towns Van Zandt, which are probably more the kind of stalwarts of outlaw country that influenced probably the kind of music that I was writing.
Yeah. So fast forward to now, and you're about to release the third album, The Real World, in October. Um, you've released The Real World as a single. What is it about that song that deserves title track status?
Well, I think it was the one song off the record that had the most important message, and probably the message that I carried through the rest of the songs as well, which is, I feel like it's an important kind of issue to talk about. And if you can get it onto radio, it spreads a little bit further. So it's really about climate change and about the current human condition and that kind of thing. And, at the time that I wrote it, it was before even the major fires had happened in Australia, but we were still going through bushfire season. There were floods, there were all kinds of things going on in the world, and those things are still going on now. So I think that deserved kind of pride of place. Yeah.
Album was recorded in Joshua Tree in America, and you received a grant from Creative Victoria, which I guess you wouldn't have been able to create this album in that way without that grant.
Oh, absolutely not. There's no way I would have been able to go to America and record with Lucinda Williams' band in the studio that we recorded in. It was really not going to be possible at all without that grant. So Creative Victoria have been wonderful supporters of my art and music for a long time. So I felt very blessed to receive that sizable grant from them. Yeah.
How much of the vibe of the town, Joshua Tree, and the studio rubbed off on you and the album?
Oh, in a huge way. I think that it wouldn't sound anything like it does without us having recorded there. We only had 2.5 days in the studio, so we kind of captured the vibe. We lay down all the bass tracks and things, like all the kind of skeleton of the record. And a lot of the overdubs and things have been done back here, which has been great at Union Street Studio in Brunswick West. But yeah, definitely the songs, the whole vibe of the thing is very much kind of encapsulates that whole desert, cosmic desert searching for aliens kind of, Southern rock vibe, which is exactly what we were going for.
Yeah. As you said, Lucinda Williams' band Buick Six played on the album. How does that happen?
Well, I was really lucky. I was working with a label at the time. My friend Tim McCormick runs that label, Blind Date Records, and it was kind of his brainchild to send me over to the States to record with them. He had, some connections over there and was friendly with Butch, who's the drummer from Lucinda's band. So that's kind of how that happened. And, it's not even something that I would have conceived of doing myself necessarily. But it was a perfect fit and just the perfect place at the perfect time. So yeah, I was very fortunate.
Yeah. How impressive were they in the studio? And was there anything about the way they worked that surprised you?
Well, yeah, they're like a machine. They've worked together for such a long time as Lucinda's band and as their own kind of entity as well. So, it was just, I've worked with a lot of professional musicians in Australia, and some of the older ones are very much as professional as these guys, but I've never seen a team work so well together. You just kind of walk in and it sounds like a hit straight away. Which is really nice, and seeing how they bounce off one another and how their ideas form and things. It was like taking a crash course in, being a side guy.
Yeah. Did they have any time to sit around and share war stories?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we sat around quite a lot, you know, having beers and sitting by the fire and standing out under the stars and stuff, talking about music. And Butch, in particular, told some incredibly funny stories about times that he's been on the road. And, you know, because they live, you know, Butch lives in LA. So it's around all those different, you know, huge artists and actors and all that kind of thing. Yeah, I can't remember any of them specifically, but I was in stitches for most of the trip.
Um, and was this album that Greg Lease played on as well?
Yes, yep, Greg played on it as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Did he play on many tracks?
He played on about half the tracks on the record, so probably four or five songs, I think. Yeah, he was just amazing. That was really like, for me, I've followed Greg's music for a long time, or he's playing, you know, on different records and things since I was a kid. So when he walked in, I just found myself tripping over my words. You know, it was like meeting a god. But yeah, his playing is just incredible and so versatile, and he fits so well in every musician's music. You know, he's a very thoughtful and emotive player, which I really enjoyed working with Greg. Yeah.
Yeah. So who produced? Who was in control of the control room?
Well, it was kind of a collaborative effort between me and the guys that played my Australian band and Buick Six. So it was kind of an all in. There was not one particular producer at the moment. Back in Australia, Roger Bergadaz, who has produced pretty much everything else that I've put out in the past few years. He was given kind of the bones of what we did in the States, and then has pulled everything together in this amazing way back in Australia. So it's really him that I have to thank for how these tracks have turned out. Yeah.
Were there any lessons learned or notes taken during the last album that you took into this one?
Definitely. I think that the last record was really a first foray into kind of exploring a different sonic landscape, and working with a band like Buick Six, I really wanted to go further down kind of the rock path. You know, there were moments of wildness on Feral Fusion, but I think that this record kind of is much more professional and much more, leaning towards that heavier side of things, which is kind of the notes that I took away from my last release. Yeah.
The new single coming out is Vivian, June, Dolly, and Jolene. Tell me how that song came about.
Well, I wrote it about 5 or 6 years ago, and it was really about, I mean, you would possibly know the story of Vivian, Johnny Cash's first wife, who was sort of done wrong by June. She wrote an expose novel before Johnny passed away, and it sort of outlined all of the gory details of what went on in that relationship, and what went on with June. And then, of course, the seminal classic Jolene is all about infidelity and how Dolly's worried that her husband's going to leave her for this redheaded bank teller, Jolene. So really, it was just a story about country singers that swap partners in the infidelity kind of way.
Yeah, there's a great slide playing on that track. Who's playing slide?
That's my guitarist, Tom Brooks. So he's from our Australian band. So this track is one that we did record in the States, but then we weren't happy with the version that we came home with. So we re-recorded it again in the studio in Brunswick West. So it's my Australian band playing on this track, and I think they did a fantastic job.
Yeah. With Buick Six and Greg Lease, people like that in the studio. Did you lay down guitar tracks yourself?
I did a few little guitar bits, but I kind of just, you know, stepped back from the instrumental side of stuff. I've added bits and pieces of my own things in post-production, but yeah, it was mostly just for me to get the vocal. But yeah, because I was in the studio with such professionals, there wasn't really much need for me to be playing guitar, which was kind of great. Relaxing.
Yeah. Well, what are the main guitars you use in your songwriting and on stage?
On stage, the main guitar that I use at the moment is a 1993 Fender Mustang. It's a Japanese reissue from the early 90s with all the original pickups and everything. It smells like someone else's cigarette smoke, which I kind of like about it. It was a guitar that I was given when I was 18, and it's the one that I always use. I love that guitar, and my guitarists both use Fenders as well. They sort of Fender diehards. And then for an acoustic guitar at the moment, I have this little Traveller, which is just a Guild small body thing that my dad's friend painted a cosmic cowboy scene on the front of. And I use that in a dropped C tuning. They're the main two guitars that I use on the road.
What do you generally play your electric through? What amp?
I have a Riviera amp that a friend gave me. It's like quite an expensive amp, but it's got this really low growl. It's kind of like a crunchy sounding, lots of mids and lows, not too much twang, which I really like. And the other amp that I use is a Fender Deluxe Reverb.
Do you have anything in the pedal board, or you like to just go straight into the amp?
I have a couple of pedals. I usually use like this multi-distortion pedal thing that my friend sent me. It's just like a no-name brand. I don't know if he made it himself. And then I have like a chorus pedal, a phaser, and I think that's about it. That's as far as my pedal board goes, because I'm not really one for soloing. I'm more the rhythm guy in our band. So, but yeah, nothing too flashy, but it sounds just right.
So when you finally get to take the band out on the road and play some gigs, hopefully soon, tell me about your band. Who's going to be playing with you?
Okay, so Holly Thomas plays drums for us. She's in another band called Quivers, which is kind of her thing, and she plays with Henry Wagons, and she's a well-known session drummer from Melbourne. Lots of bigger acts have used her. Bill Chambers, I think, has used her as well. She's a fantastic drummer. So she plays on the Vivian, June, Dolly and Jolene track. And then Tom Brooks, who plays in just about every country band in Melbourne. And he also gets sent up to Sydney a bit to play with a few different bands up there. Louis King, who's in Sex on Toast and Dope Lemon and Jazz Party and a bunch of other bands. He plays guitar with us. And then Tim Baker, who is a guitarist and bassist, but he plays bass with us.
The pandemic has been tough on all musicians. How's it affected you personally, and what have you been doing during the lockdowns to stay sane?
Oh, goodness me. It has. I mean, it's obviously impacted my ability to work very much, because being down here in Victoria, there's been 5 lockdowns now, which is just ridiculous. For most of last year, I didn't really play at all. I started playing shows again in December last year. During the time when there were no shows, I was still writing and stuff and still playing reasonably regularly, and focusing on writing a bit of poetry and things. And then I started doing a lot more shows once things opened up here in January. We went into another lockdown in February. So it kind of did delay the whole recording process, touring process, releasing music process, because there's not really a lot of point in releasing a song when you're stuck in lockdown, or an album for that matter. But yeah, I've used the time a lot to start working on the next record, which I've written most of the material for. I've probably written about 30 songs for it, but that'll obviously be condensed down to 9 or something. And focusing on just enjoying music and art and things at home, and waiting for stuff to open up so that I can get on the road again.
So what's the grand plan for Freya, Josephine, Holly?
Oh, there's so many grand plans. I would hope to get to the States again at some point in the next sort of year and a half would be good if it's possible. And to continue releasing records. Hopefully once this record's out, we can start work on the next one, which I'm planning to work on with Jack Ladder, which will be really good fun. He'll be producing it. And, continue releasing singles, tour, hopefully, if things open up enough for us to be able to tour. I have a lot of festivals and shows coming up in October, but a lot of things are already being rescheduled and cancelled, obviously, because of the current lockdowns in New South Wales. Yeah.
All right, Freya, it's been great to chat, and we'll catch you next time.
Lovely talking to you. Thanks for having me.